UFP, the United Federation of Podcasts.
Engage.
78 years have passed since the days of the original USS Enterprise. Now a new Galaxy starship has been designed.
Transporter Chief, beam our listeners aboard. Welcome to Galaxy Class, a Star Trek The Next Generation podcast on the United Federation of Podcast Network. I am your Chief Recreational Officer, Ria Papagiorgio, with our Counselor, Amy Nelson, Diplomatic Standard Bearer, Kevin Scharf, and our Head of Baking, Joe Keegan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hello.
Hi, Ria.
Hello, everybody.
How are we all?
We're good. We're excited.
Staying warm.
Yeah.
It's
Minus 25 or something?
minus
Celsius?
21 with wind chill of minus 25. Yes.
Ridiculous.
Mhm.
Move south.
Yeah.
But they have hurricanes and tornadoes and alligators in the
Tsunami
south.
warnings, I've heard.
I can deal with a little cold.
Not that far south.
Good point.
The worst
That's
thing
not a
about
little
winter,
cold.
the worst thing about winter isn't the cold, because you can always put sweaters on and get warm. It's the darkness. I hate how short the days are. And Joe, you live farther north than I do, so I'm sure it affects you as much as it affects me.
Yeah. We get like an hour of daylight a day,
It's
usually.
awful.
That's why I look
awful.
like a
Thanks.
vampire.
Yeah, Amy's not complaining about the cold.
Well, I will, but it doesn't do me any good because you have no sympathy. None of
No.
you for me.
None whatsoever.
No.
Below 110 and Amy complains about the cold.
Well,
But we do
justifiably so.
get all the sunlight, and that is why I'm here. I get sun all day. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's a nice thing.
Yeah.
You keep saying that, Amy. I'm going to move into that extra room of yours.
Okay.
You're laughing now, but
I've been watching a vlogger do his vlogs from Las Vegas this week, and I'm like, oh, I want to go back to Las Vegas, like now.
Yeah.
August, end of August.
Maybe. I wanted to know why Joe is head of baking. What are you baking?
Oh yeah.
Oh, do you know, I've been binge watching The Great Australian Bake Off, which is a spin-off to The Great British Bake
Oh,
Off.
Australian. I've never watched Australian.
It's good. The two hosts are really funny. Yeah, loving it. But tonight for dinner, I'm making chicken, mushroom, and leek hot water crust pie.
Oh,
Mm.
lovely.
Not
that
very
sounds-
healthy. It's got lard in it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And some
A little
Greens.
lard's
greens.
good for the soul.
Yeah,
Yes, good for the
Keep me-
skin.
keep us warm during winter. So looking forward to that. Then tomorrow
Oh.
might be croissant.
Ooh,
Ooh.
fancy.
For
So
Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Why not?
Why
Very
not?
Yeah,
With so much butter.
all the bar.
Well, that sounds good. We're all coming over to Joe's for dinner.
Yeah,
Sounds like a
more than
plan.
welcome.
Book your flights now. Let's check the communication array to see if we have any comments from our listeners.
Logs accessed.
From episode 72, which was our super random Tombola Ria Topics Part 1 episode on the Federation Council chambers. I've no idea why Ria Papagiorgio has commented on the same podcast that she hosted. Seems a bit like egotistical.
Self-indulgent?
Yeah, I know. Ria says, okay, listening to this episode, playing along with the abbreviations game, and I failed at all but the last one. Ria, I was editing it and I failed at it, and I edited it just after we recorded. Could still not get them.
That's a hard game.
Yeah.
It was hard.
I thought
It
it would
was
be easy.
hard.
We also have a comment from my co-host over on All Good Things, Mark White, and says, I'm loving the discussion this week, and I'm surprised that 35 minutes into the episode, I'm still not sure what the topic is about, unless Tombola stands for side conversations.
Well done, Amy.
Regardless, thank you. Regardless, it's very fun listening to some of my favorite people sit around and discuss Trek-related topics.
That's what we're doing. Sitting around
Nice.
talking about Trek-related topics.
Mark, I think you need to re-listen to the beginning of the episode where we
Have a
Discuss
whole
what Tombola
conversation
is.
about what Tombola is. Yeah.
You've infected him, Rhea.
No.
We got a message from Paul Wright Jr. who says, in 44 years on this planet, I have never even heard of this word. And after listening to the podcast, I'm still not sure what it means.
Yeah,
Another
Paul, I'm
listener
with
that
you.
doesn't listen.
Oh, Americans.
I know.
I love our Tombola series. I think it's going to be a huge hit going forward.
That's right.
I think so too. Whose idea was it?
I don't know. Somebody who lives on another continent.
Someone who doesn't even know how to pronounce it, I'm sure.
Me. Take credit.
Well, Vera Bible writes, another great podcast. Did you all get Tombola from the UK bingo site? That's the first thing I thought of when I saw the episode. I've always heard it pronounced Tombola. That's an odd way to say it.
Vera, you're exactly right. Thank you.
And
Back
Vera,
up from the
thank
listeners.
you. Yes, thank you for that, because now I know how to pronounce it.
Hold on, you knew
Not
how
what
to pronounce
Merriam-Webster
it
says,
because,
but-
like, I told you, and you would naturally believe your co-host.
Well, Vera put it out with the accent on the bow.
And that's the way I
So-
say it.
Yeah, that's how I remembered it.
Sake.
Good job, Vera. Thank
To
you.
each your own.
True. We have our last message is from Greg Molumby. I like the idea of just random ideas episode. Maybe an idea is taking something really random from an episode and talking about it. For example, maybe how Geordie's visor worked, or Captain Picard being an underrated pilot and armory officer. The possibilities might be endless. Greg, couldn't agree more. Do you know what? See, when I read your comment about how Geordie's visor worked, my head cannon started to spin out schematics about subspace antenna picking up like omnispectral frequencies from and like channeling them into his optic nerve. Yeah, I had it all figured out. So yeah, love it. We will talk about that one day.
Yes, for sure.
This is the captain. Senior officers will report to my ready room immediately.
Well, listeners, today we are super duper excited. We have an awesome, amazing guest with us today. He is a writer and a producer for Star Trek Prodigy, a lifelong Star Trek fan, a Guinness World Record holder, I heard from a little birdie, the one and only Aaron Waltke. Aaron, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, it's truly a pleasure. You know, I love talking about Star Trek, probably too much, but happy to always nerd out with my fellow Trekkies or Trekkers, whatever you prefer.
There's no such thing as talking about Star Trek too much.
Yeah.
That's why we podcast about it. There's so much to talk about.
Every week.
People listen to us talk about Star Trek.
I know.
It's true.
And then talk to us about talking about Star Trek. So
Well, that's what's fun about it, I think, you know, and I think that's, you know, obviously, you know, the UK had their Doctor Who or whatnot, but I feel like Star Trek in particular, their fandom is really what kind of set them apart as a franchise. You know, obviously Star Wars came along in the 70s, but even then they only had, for the longest time, only 3 movies, whereas we had show after show after show after movie after show after movie, and they all slowly sort of kind of connected together in this massive galaxy of storytelling, and truly an epic feat when you think about it, where you have literally hundreds of people across decades of culture all trying to tell one story. And it's in a way, it almost reminds, this is going to sound very highfalutin, but this is the stuff I just think about, is like, it's a little bit like the Homeric storytelling tradition, right? Where, like, you know, Homer was perhaps not one person. It was a series of people that would tell and retell and expand and add chapters to, until we had this sort of epic that became sort of this shared narrative storytelling experience. And I feel like Star Trek is a little bit like that, except we have the originals. So instead of sort of just retelling, we're also clicking onto, and you could go back and see the original and see how they're redefining it in new eras, or adding to, or retconning, or expanding, or re-explaining. And it's really, really exciting to be in that sort of cultural conversation, you know, as a writer for Star Trek and as a lifelong fan. It's been, you know, a dream come true is a way, perhaps a tropey way to describe it. But the way that comes to mind that I've said elsewhere is, like, you know, I've written for a lot of shows over the years, but Star Trek has always been truly foundational for my approach to writing stories. And for this show in particular, when I started writing, more than anything, it didn't feel like work. It felt more like almost like breathing. Like, of course, that's how a Heisenberg compensator works. And, and like, of course, the pattern disperser prevented them from transporting. Like, it just kind of intuitively was all in there. I didn't have to stop that much and think about the logic of it, because the logic, as we know in Star Trek, has already been figured out, at least to a certain degree. And then beyond that, you just have to accept that there's a giant Abraham Lincoln floating in space.
Can I ask you then, I want to follow up, like, does that make it easier or more difficult, knowing that you've got over 50 years of stories that have been already told in this universe? When you're coming up with new stories for Prodigy, knowing you've got that to draw from, does that make it easier, or does it make it harder because you want to avoid things that have already been done?
Well, what's kind of interesting in particular about our show, Star Trek Prodigy, is that we had a mandate from the beginning. And I think the reason why everyone was so excited about it is, like, even as a lifelong Star Trek fan, I have regularly kind of come across this conundrum where people who maybe don't know much about Star Trek say, where do I start? And I'm like, gosh, where do you start? And I usually just say, I don't know, watch about 100 hours of television and you'll kind of absorb it by osmosis. Like even usually I'll say maybe TNG, because I feel like that's maybe the closest you have to an on-ramp. But even then, that kind of throws you right into the middle of it. And like the second episode is referencing TOS, like and you if you don't know what Starfleet is, or the Federation, or their mission and their mandate and stuff, like there's a lot of kind of presumptions there that I think, as a kid, I don't think I right away understood it. It was more, I just kind of absorbed it. And, the same way a lot of people did in the 80s and 90s, they just kind of, you're exposed to enough of it and your brain starts to pick up on the patterns of like, oh, they always say hailing frequencies open, they always have to, energize, but sometimes they can't get a lock. You pick up on that stuff over time. And I think that, for better or for worse, we are in sort of a golden era of storytelling for television, where there is sort of an expectation to not necessarily handhold, but there's an impatience, I think, to get to the good stuff and to engage new audiences right off the bat, so they not only understand what's going on but love it. So I was eager to take that challenge on, because I love Star Trek, and I've already done the hard part of sifting through the hundreds of hours of the shows, and I know where the good stuff is. And so it became very it was very not easy is probably the wrong word, but it was interesting when we started having these early conversations, because the writer's room for Prodigy opened up very early in the process. I think the Hagemans had written like one draft of the pilot, and there was still a lot of questions that they wanted input on. And thankfully, like, they've always been very meritocratic in how, and this is something I do when I'm running a TV show as well. It's always sort of best idea wins. Let's talk this out. And so we, as a room, I would say half of it was like hardcore Trekkies like yours truly. And then the other half were people that enjoyed Star Trek, but, they had their favorites. Like, I love Wrath of Khan. I saw Next Generation, but maybe hadn't seen every episode of Enterprise, and so as we were kind of having that conversation, it became very obvious as we were like, okay, what are the fundamental cores? Like, if we're going to introduce younger audiences and new audiences, what are just some of the basic principles that maybe Star Trek takes for granted? And it was very quickly that like, oh, wow, there's actually like a lot that you might just kind of assume, if you're a hardcore Star Trek fan, that is never addressed really in a full episode, or if it is, it's like some really great episode, like the Universal Translators, right? There's not really that many episodes that sit down and explain how a Universal Translator works. There's a few amazing ones, like one of my favorites, which is of course Darmok, that sort of talks about the limitations of language and whatnot. But again, that comes in the middle of the series. So we were like, gosh, wouldn't it be interesting to kind of start outside the Federation looking in? and have the characters that maybe are, if not tabula rasas, complete blank slates, they at least aren't totally familiar with the Federation and its ideals, and get to be introduced to that, piecemeal, bit by bit, along with our new audiences. And so, we thought, obviously, universal translators seem to be fairly common, throughout, advanced civilizations in the Milky Way. But we were like, what if there was an area where they specifically kind of weaponized the fact that that reliance on it and turned it off as a means of control, and you have all these characters that don't have the ability to communicate, which I think is so fundamental to what the Federation is about, is like reaching out and building bridges. And very quickly we kind of identified these sort of core building blocks that narratively speaking kind of fit into that story of, rather than starting in the heart of Starfleet and being on a bridge, with a seasoned commander or a commanding officer, you have characters that start outside the Federation and we start with those strange new life and civilizations and venturing towards the Federation instead of the other way around. And we thought that was a really interesting perspective that fits, we thought, perfectly into the Star Trek universe, but just hadn't been told yet. And yes, I think that's why it was exciting. And very quickly we were like, oh, we should have an episode that explains how transporters work. We should have an episode that explains what the Prime Directive is, which to be honest, I think even Star Trek has been a little vague sometimes.
For sure.
And we were like, oh, we can actually finally, put some specificity on some of these things. And in a way that I think new audiences can understand their importance, and also the sort of moral and philosophical conundrums around them, which again, that's, in my mind, that's Star Trek to a T. And so it was really an interesting exercise that by the time we had just gone through our list, on top of, finding our character arcs and finding like, okay, who are these characters? Who will they start? Who will they become as they venture closer to the Federation and are saturated more in these Starfleet ideals, which they perhaps are at first faking it and then eventually come to embrace as a possible future for themselves.
I have a question about that, where you're saying like where they're going to go. And I've always wondered, and of course, like, I love TNG. So when I look at Encounter at Farpoint and then All Good Things 7 years later, there's no way when they were writing that they, were going to have this end result be so amazing as All Good Things. But nowadays, because I guess, do you know how many seasons? Not that I'm asking, but how do you know where to end up? Or is it just, we're going to go in that direction type of mentality where we don't have an end point? Yeah,
it's, I think the era of serialized storytelling, which has become the sort of soup du jour in television, I think does kind of require you to think a little bit more about endgame stuff. And I've talked about this on other like screenwriting podcasts and whatnot, but I think the best way, in my opinion, to navigate that is to have like a loose skeleton of like, if you had to make this show, gun to your head right now, where do your characters start? And then, 3 or 4 or 5 or however, God willing, seasons there may be at the end of the series, what do you think is their sort of North Star that you kind of go straight on till morning? So if you have sort of a loose idea of like where they start, where their character would potentially end up, and then by that process of deduction, you can find sort of a middle point where they'll have some sort of realization or growth or character evolution. Then you can start to bifurcate that into smaller storytelling sections. Like, okay, we know where eventually they're going to wind up as a character, down the road, way down the road. So what's the first step in that journey, and how can we organically get them to that step? So the short answer is we do a lot of planning as far as like character arcs, where characters start, how they behave in certain ways, how that will change. And then as we dig in and drill down into the seasons, that's when we start to look at, okay, so what are some tangible episodes that could have an effect on our character and start not only show where they came from, but also be sort of an inflection point for where they're going. And so you can see that growth organically. However, we also try our very best to not get so bogged down in the mechanics of it that we don't leave room for discovery. No pun intended. Because I think that's sure, as a showrunner or a show creator, or you can very easily get into this thing of just like mechanically plotting out every single episode and creating a roadmap for the next 10 seasons, and like, this is where they're going to go. And but then as you're actually writing the episodes and you're breaking it with other smart writers and you're figuring it out, you may discover things you never would have thought about when you're just sitting in your room in front of a computer on your own. Or you might look at things from a different perspective that you never really realized, or discover things on the page as you're writing a scene. Like, oh my God, I never thought about that from that perspective, but that's an interesting insight into that character that I hadn't thought about before. So the story evolves as you go. And sometimes there'll be things you maybe initially, when you were just writing out a synopsis, there would be, oh, well, in season 3, this character is going to have this revelation or turn. And then when you're writing it, you're like, why are we holding off on the good stuff till then? Let's move that to the end of season 2. And then let's evolve in that character further and see how it goes, And so like, it's a conversation and it's a process. So it's an equal parts sort of luck meets preparation, I guess, where I worked on a series called Tales of Arcadia with the Hagemans, with Guillermo del Toro, and Guillermo had this expression of sort of he called it a special alchemy, right? Where you have, it's almost like lightning in a bottle, where you have just sort of planning, but also creativity, and everybody is sort of steel sharpening steel, going from strength to strength, and everybody bringing something new to the table, so that sometimes there will be something that will be discovered. Like maybe a producer will say, hey, I thought you were going to go this direction with it. I thought it was, and then that's a much better idea than what we had planned.
Yeah.
Or a storyboard artist might be like, oh, I just thought maybe he could do something like this because it felt like organic to his character. It's like, we love that. We're going to rewrite it and lean into that. So it very much is us trying to make the best thing possible, with almost like a theater troupe in a way. We're all kind of embracing these characters and finding ways to make them more, for lack of a better term, human and filled out. And it's a very fun, interesting, slightly chaotic, but there is method to the madness process.
It kind of reminds me of the way that that Gwyn was created. The progeny. She started out in a test tube and kind of program in, and this is what she's supposed to be. But then as she lives her 17 years and interacts with different people, blossoms into something even better than what you could have expected. It's very nature versus nurture in that way. Yeah.
You mentioned theater, and I like in the, like, when you're acting live, you can discover things in the moment. That's got to be harder to do when you're looking in animation, though, right? Because voice tracks are recorded separately from storyboards from final animation, right? The time period is longer.
You would think that it would be harder, but actually, as you said, the time period is longer. So if we do discover something in the performance, we, as much as we can, we will try to get the real performance in, so the board artists can hear that and then change the boards to match the performance and give a little bit of a spice or a characterization that maybe you might not see otherwise. So it's both a blessing and a curse how long it takes to make animation. They say art is never done, you just run out of time. And that's sort of been our experience, is like, we keep tinkering with it until the last bit, and then it's off. And then thankfully all the stuff you were trying or this or that, usually people just see the end result and you're like, that's great.
That's amazing.
Aaron, as a follow-up to Amy's question about the journey that you take through the seasons, are you saying that by the end of season 1, they rescue Chakotay and the crew of the Protostar from the Diviner's prison? That's what I'm thinking.
That's so beyond spoilers, I can't answer that. But
I thought that's what I heard when you were speaking there.
For the record, you'll have to watch and find out. But
I'm going to watch it.
Yeah,
I'm going to watch it anyway. It's got Star Trek in the name, so it's getting watched.
But I will say this, and I've said which is just bear in mind that we are only 6 or 7 episodes into what has been confirmed to be 40 episodes that we have ordered and are writing now. So in terms of the how quickly you'll get answers and how quickly storylines will be wrapped up, we're trying not to rush that stuff because we do like having there to be a sort of an organic evolution of the story, and we didn't want to front load it and overload it with plot that gets in the way of the character story. So we're trying to strike a balance at all times because, I think that there are some characters that obviously are more meaningful to Starfleet than perhaps our heroes, but then, over time they'll get to know those characters, either through logs or elsewhere. I think we've already announced that there's going to be other legacy characters coming. The best analogy I can think of is like in Deep Space Nine, for instance, right? They plant the mystery right in like the beginning of the first season of the Odo's origins. He doesn't know where he's from, that's his sort of his longing, and then I think it's not until like mid-season 2 that you start to understand, oh, he's a changeling and they're from the Dominion. But even then, that's just the start of a greater exploration that then dominates the rest of the series of like who the Dominion are. So it's like we're trying not to bull rush our way through just to have it be like a cavalcade of cameos and stuff, but actually make the characters, our new characters and new audiences, slowly understand who these characters are, then care about them by the time they do get to encounter them. So that, I think to that end, there are some things that will get answered and get resolved, but I think most of them will get resolved eventually, but it's not going to happen like overnight. And I think and that's by design and intention, because we don't want it just to be like, hey, look at Scotty, oh cool. Like I did a little bit of that in Kobayashi because it was fun, and we found a way to earn it with the holodeck program, and we found there was an ironic reason to do it because our kids literally don't know who these characters are. And it kind of deepened his character arc in that episode, because in having literally this murderer's row of incredible legacy characters, it further pronounced the fact that the weak link in the chain was not his crew, but actually himself. And so that's how we were able to earn that. But for the most part, we are trying to dole it out in a way that it's meaningful rather than just like a fire hose of nostalgia.
And I am personally loving the pace. I mean, Joe, we can't take him anywhere because he's always trying to get spoilers, but no, I'm loving the pace that Prodigy's going. And I have to tell you my Kobayashi story. So that episode dropped on a Thursday. From the Tuesday before until the following Tuesday, you could say I had a long week. Like I can honestly say that I like cried more in that week span than probably the previous 5 years combined, true story. And so by the time Kobayashi dropped on Thursday, it was just like sweetness to my soul, especially as a TOS fan. And I can't tell you how many times I've rewatched it since. And in that week, just kept watching it over and over because it was just such a comfort. But you get me all excited. Like we could go on and on and on. I could go on and on and on about this episode. But first of all, the holodeck simulation opens up on the Enterprise D. So, got to know like what the Enterprise D, like how did that decision come along?
Well, I mean, in truth, it just came down to me. But I mean, I guess the true answer, there's the in-universe answer and then there's the out-of-universe answer. I don't know what you want to hear first. I guess I'll start by saying the in-universe answer is, the Kobayashi Maru, as we've seen it canonically in Star Trek, is updated over time. We've only seen it twice in canon, but the first time that we see it, obviously it's meant to be you're meant to believe it's the bridge of the Enterprise. And back then the hologram technology wasn't robust enough, so they literally had the bridge crew of the Enterprise play acting the death over and over again to help these cadets in Wrath of Khan. But when you actually dig into the logic of it, they, even in Wrath of Khan and elsewhere in the J.J. Abrams movies and whatnot, you hear that, Kirk is the infamous, he cheated because he doesn't believe in hopeless situations. But if you look at the timeline of it all, the neutral zone, such as it was, didn't exist during the time that Kirk was a cadet, meaning they must have changed the parameters. And therefore, if A equals B equals C, if you flash forward 100 years, they almost certainly would have updated a little bit, because, for a training simulation, I don't think it would be terribly helpful for them to learn how to fly on a Constitution class ship in the 2370s and 80s. Why the D and not the E? There's a couple of possible answers that we never really went into. One is like, maybe they just, whoever was the holo programmer at Starfleet Academy hadn't gotten around to updating the parameters. It's also possible that I think the more likely answer is you can kind of see Dal as messing around with the settings and kind of like picking little bits and things. And I think it's just that must have been the one that he happened to have selected. But as we know, in Kobayashi Maru, there is always a ship, the Kobayashi Maru. There is always enemies, it seems, always the Klingons, perhaps. And it is always impossible to actually succeed. Those are the kind of the three rules that we knew we had to adhere to, and then the rest we kind of borrowed from beta canon a little bit, because there's a number of books written about how other famous Starfleet officers took the Kobayashi Maru and their reactions, and what happens if you refuse to participate. And the answer is, as Sulu found out in one of the novels, your crew will threaten a mutiny, which is exactly what happens in our episode. When Uhura and Odo threaten to resign their commissions.
Yes.
So that's the in-universe explanation. The out.
Okay,
out
so yes, what is
now for the real
out
reason.
of universe? And I am so curious, after all of your talking and so eloquently describing Star Trek, you obviously are a fan. So I want to know, how were you first introduced? And I love hearing these stories. Like, my mother was the one to introduce me to Star Trek. There usually is like a familial connection with that. So if you could share that with us as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's actually exactly where I was going to go, because it's
nice.
It is the part, probably the most significant part of the answer of the out of universe explanation of why the Enterprise D, which is my first exposure to Star Trek, is also one of my first memories as a human being. I am a child of the 80s. I'm almost 40 now, but literally one of my earliest memories, I was sitting on the couch with my dad, and there was this sweeping fanfare playing on the screen, and I saw the saucer separating from the secondary hull, and it was so dramatic, and I knew it was very exciting. I didn't know why, but I was clearly feeding off my dad's energy, and I realized that I was watching live the premiere of Star Trek: The Next Generation way back in September of 1987. And that's literally one of my first memories as a human being. Wow. And it never really stopped. My dad was a hardcore original series fan. He watched it in college in syndication and such. And so he had all of he had his own little communicator badge and I think he bought the earliest replica that actually you could press it. It was actually kind of weird because he had a little communicator you could flip open and it would go Clark here. And then he had a communicator badge that was battery operated, but it was so thick. It was like this thing.
Batteries back then.
I had one of those.
I had one of those D-cell batteries.
And you would press it and it would make the comm badge chirp. But for me, the Enterprise D was just home. Like, it was just, and I think for so many, at least of my generation, it was this sort of like bridge in more ways than one between the old and the new. And I think if the Sovereign class bridge is fine, but I think that the D has such an iconic, very specific, like it has that almost like honeycomb structures and the horseshoe, and it looks so specifically interesting in a way that some of the other starships didn't. and we knew we were going to have a pretty large cast, or we were going to aim to have a lot of cast. And I always just loved the layout of it. And because the Kobayashi Maru always was the Enterprise, or implied to be the Enterprise, we were like, well, literally they came to me and like, which one should we do? And I was like, And then I was like, it's got to be the D, man.
Yeah.
I had to be the D, didn't it? Because I think if it wasn't the D, us as viewers would have had less of an emotional reaction to it. If you're at TNG, if I grew up watching TNG with my mom, she introduced me to the original series and reruns. And so I think I paused it because I was having trouble focusing on what was happening. I was like, pause it, rewind it, go back to the beginning, because this is... See, even just thinking about it, like there's a risk that I might tear up.
It's true. I
living that effect.
I had the same, this is going to sound corny, but I had the same effect as I was writing the scenes. And I was like, whenever I would think about a young person being exposed to this and in this episode, and I've heard from so many Trekkies on Trek fans on Twitter, that are like, I could not get my kids to sit still and watch Star Trek until this episode. And now they are asking, oh, can we go see the other shows? And as I was writing it, I knew there was a very real possibility that if I succeeded, at least in some small way, that could be the I could show them like, hey, stick with it. This cool stuff's going to happen. Check it out. And and so as I was writing the D and into the episode, and the characters materializing and one by one saying some little snippet from their legacy, it really was a powerful moment for me of just like, wow, we really have created this incredible tapestry, and all of it as maybe surprising as the appearances of those different characters are, they do weave together. And as I was combing through, I think all told, I rewatched about 40 or 50 episodes of Star Trek, and I reread about 90 scripts, just trying to find the right lines and stuff. It in a very metatextual way, I started to just sort of see the code behind the Matrix, and I started to see that there is this sort of Star Trek scene that I was getting to write with all of these different characters of like, there is sort of a call and response, and there is sort of like a progression of beginning, middle, and end that all Star Trek has always hearkened to. And I got to in a small way sort of recreate that in a very encapsulated way so that kids could experience that and understand that framework when they went back and watched the other shows. So it was,
It was amazing. It was woven in so well. And I mean, I can say, I guess it sounds like, Joe, it took your breath away to see the D. When I heard Uhura's voice, heard her voice, it took my breath away. I was like, like a gut punch, but in a good way. And then I'm like, wait a minute, was that actually Nichelle Nichols? And then Dr. Crusher appears, and then Odo and his grunt. I'm like, well, that sounded like Renee. And then, science officer. And in my mind, I remember just in that little moment, I'm like, be Spock, be Spock, be Spock. And then Spock appeared, and I think my neighbors heard me scream.
That's when I teared up. Like the whole thing, hearing Leonard Nimoy's voice again. And even though I heard some criticism, that was early season and late in the JJ. And I'm like, it was brilliant. I loved hearing all of his voice, and I appreciated hearing that, because then we get all of his journey that comes back just from hearing his voice.
We get 45 years worth of Leonard Nimoy. That's what got me about to tear up. And then he gives the Vulcan salute, and Dal gives him the sci-5, and I fell over laughing. So it was just brilliant.
Yeah. And I think there was a point in the middle when I realized that, because as as incredible as Nimoy's performance is, so much of it was recorded back in the 1960s, and it was just like this, they were doing the best they could, but it's not like Star Trek was the biggest budget show on television at the time. And so they just had I've since seen the production stills, it's just like a boom mic that was just kind of hovering over them, that was trying to catch it as they performed and swivel between them, and recorded on magnetic tape that the sort of had a sort of a guttural quality to it. Our audio engineers I think did literally the absolute best they could to clean it up and compress it, but there's literally only so much you can do at a certain point without re-recording the lines with a new actor. And I think we had decided very early on we weren't really interested in that, and we would rather people acknowledge that this is a holodeck program, and experience Nimoy's original character work and performance than worry about the quote unquote seamlessness of it, because it is all sort of a simulation, and it's not the worst thing in the world to be reminded of that. Again, to kind of say like, oh, this is just a recreation, we should go back and see the original. There was I think right towards the end, as I was trying to, there was a few lines that I knew that I wanted Nimoy Spock to say to Dal when we kind of got past the fun and games and more like, what are you actually meant to take from this? And and Spock being the ultimate number one. Riker is great, but I think it's hard to say that Spock is a worse number one. I think that I did grow very sort of philosophical about it, and I had this realization that there is a very real chance that for the foreseeable future, this may be the last time that we see Leonard Nimoy's performance as Spock in Star Trek. And so if you listen very carefully, I actually selected lines from every era of appearance of Nimoy. Like it starts with season 1 of Star Trek. Yeah. Enemy Within, I think. Yep. and then it eventually graduates to the TOS movies, The Needs of the Many, The Needs of the Few. And then it goes to Unification from TNG, in your own, it's the only logical conclusion in your own way. Mm-hmm. Your stubbornness reminds me of another captain, or as stubborn as another captain I once knew. And then I would, in terms of like the live long and prosper, the final goodbye, I struggled with that a lot. I was like, I wanted to find the right one that had the right gravitas, because in the first of all, you'd be surprised how few times Spock actually says that in the series. And like, I think he only says it maybe 8 or 9 times total in 55 plus years. And a lot of the early ones, Spock was kind of just tossing it off. He was just saying, live long and prosper. It wasn't until the movies and that it started to get a little bit more of that gravitas. And it wasn't until the 2009 performance in Star Trek 2009 that I actually, you could hear there was another element in Leonard's voice where you could say he really was saying goodbye and good luck. Yes. And I felt like that was probably the best, because that's obviously that was his intent. And I wanted that to be reflected in this final, for lack of a better term, farewell and thank you from Leonard. So sorry, I'm getting a little emotional thinking about that.
So am I, because it came through. It totally came through.
Mm-hmm. So when it came to writing this episode, did you know what you needed the characters to say, and then had to, is there a grand database of all Star Trek scripts where you could just search for what you needed, or did you have to go through episodes one by one to find what you needed them to say? I'm thinking of especially Odo,
Yeah, you would think that it would be an easy process, but it really it was not.
Are you best friends with the archives people over there?
That's a word for it. I think they tolerated me.
Right.
because I think that they acknowledged that I was trying to do something very special. And so whenever I did send them an email at like midnight on a Sunday saying like, I need Spock to say transporter operational from this type code, they would sort of, stop doing whatever they were doing for every other Star Trek related thing that they were doing and try to get it to me as soon as possible. But it wasn't as easy as you might think. I
don't think it was easy at all.
Yeah, right. But it was maybe even harder than you might think, where there wasn't just like, here is a searchable database or anything. Like the closest I had actually was fans had done transcripts.
Right. Yes, we use them.
Yeah. So I wound up using a lot of sort of Boolean search algorithms to kind of help me at least place where certain lines were from. Right. And there were some lines that I absolutely knew were going to be in there. For instance, like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. In your own way, your stubbornness reminds me of another Captain of the Enterprise I once knew.
Now there was the line that Crusher said about his stubbornness should be in a medical.
Yes. Yeah. that one was actually improvised by Gates McFadden. She had a really fun time recording. She was the only one that we brought back because we did realize that we needed at least someone to kind of help glue some of the scene work together. And Gates McFadden thankfully stepped in and was happy to do it. And of course I wanted an emissary from Next Generation anyway. So it was great that I actually got to write lines for her. I've said elsewhere that it was a process where, we were largely trying to figure out, how many people we could bring into the booth and how many people we would use legacy lines for. And I think in the original draft, I had written like 8 or 9 people. I went a little overboard, but there are physical limitations to how many characters we could actually create in time for the episode. There's also limitations of like just the lines that were available to us, if they could actually fit into the Kobayashi Maru. There's also like how many science officers can you really have on the bridge? Yeah. Because I think there was a draft, like I wrote like 8 or 9 iterations, not counting all of the alts that I pulled from the archives. I think at one point I had Worf was a big part of it. I think at one point I worked in the Doctor as there was, I think Data was also on the table, but then we realized Data and Spock in the same room. I feel like, I think we had a couple of scenes in Unification where they've occupied very much this kind of the same sort of, logic robot kind of archetype.
Role, yeah.
So to answer your original question, it really did come down to, I used to be a documentarian when I started my career. I made documentaries for PBS, and it wasn't that dissimilar in a way from those days when you would record all these interviews and you would have these talking heads and these transcripts, and you realize that they are talking about the same things, and so you cut them together in a way that it does feel like they are talking to each other, And so my brain kind of just shifted to those days. I was just like, I know how to do this. I've done this before. And it never, it was hard work, but it never felt like, I can't believe I have to do this again. It was more like, ooh, I can't wait to get into this and make sure I get it just right.
Right.
And so I would have to go, sometimes I'd find the transcript of just like, okay, I read through the script. I think these lines might work. And then I'd go through the episode and watch them, but then the inflection would be strange or not appropriate, or with the old 1960s microphones, somebody would be like walking across a room or coughing, or literally in the edit. There was a couple of times that we couldn't get around it, but there's a few times in TOS where they straight up just cut it in a way that it's a very bad audio edit. And if you go back and watch it, you're like, oh, they just kind of lived with it. But when you hear it in isolation, it becomes a little more pointed. So it was very much a process of going back and forth and trying to find lines that piecemeal started to feel, like I wound up creating just like a database of like, here's 10 lines of Odo being angry at someone that sound like he could be talking to Dal in the situation. And I knew the structure of the scene because I wrote it, and the Kobayashi move provides that sort of structure. So it was just at that point, it was then more like, all right, let's collect options. And then at first I tried to give the editors like carte blanche, like, here's some possibilities. And they're like, just tell us which ones are the good ones.
Yeah.
so I ultimately
Perfect.
had to kind of ghost direct some of that dialogue exchange in those scenes.
Well, that's awesome that you had that background as a documentarian, because I know everyone keeps saying it, but the episode just turned out beautifully. But how did you become a PBS documentarian? Like, how did you even get into this industry?
Sure. Well, it's, the short answer is I went to Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, which is notably the birthplace of Captain Janeway. But the reason that is the birthplace of Captain Janeway is because Jerry Taylor is also an alma mater of Indiana University. And she donated her personal effects from Star Trek to the Lilly Library, which is sort of like a rare manuscript library on campus. So when I was attending Indiana University, Lee Sheldon, who is a Next Generation writer, was a professor there, adjunct professor at the time, I think. And then there was also those scripts were on hand. So I kind of learned how to write scripts by literally reading the original annotated drafts of Voyager scripts that Jerry Taylor had, in her possession, that she had donated to the library for use by students. So that was kind of like my Star Trek connection, I suppose, in college. But what was also kind of cool about Indiana University in particular is they had a PBS station that was affiliated with the university. So like, as I got into the upper level courses and then graduated, I literally got to work on documentaries and learn the nuts and bolts of how to record interviews, how to light, how to edit, how to cut. And so that was kind of part of my my education as a filmmaker, on top of all my liberal arts education, and also learning how to write stories through the theater department. And I had done a lot of theater work, and I also was part of the oldest sketch comedy group at IU called Boy in the Bubble, and that became sort of like a de facto writer's room in a way, because it was a very large troupe. I think on average we had about 15 members, depending on who was available that week for classes or whatever. And so anybody could bring in a sketch. So, and then we'd all vote on it, and like the best sketches got in. So if your sketch wasn't good, you could take notes, rewrite it, bring it back the next week. And it was basically like a writer's room in a way, boot camp. And I also directed a few plays. I put up a production of a one-act play from Bertolt Brecht called The Beggar and the Dead Dog. And so I was very much sort of laser focused, I think, on telling stories some way or another. And I was trying to get as much exposure to all of that as possible. And it just so happens that filmmaking and documentary filmmaking spoke most to my own personal interest, just in terms of science and art and philosophy and theater, all kind of converging.
Yeah. So where did that come from, that laser focus you had to tell stories?
Gosh, I mean, I think it never really left me, but when I was a kid, obviously I loved sci-fi and fantasy and stuff. I grew up literally between two cornfields in the outskirts of Greenwood, Indiana. And so like there wasn't a lot to do. So we had to and our internet dial-up modem was terrible. So so we had to kind of invent our own entertainment. And usually that meant just keeping the local Blockbuster Video, again, what's that, completely rented out of all of their science fiction and fantasy movies. And then my friends and I would just like sit on the playground or go to each other's house and just endlessly debate whether the Terminator could fight the Predator, and then eventually my parents got a camcorder that was like I think it was not even, it was like the predecessor to mini DV, but basically we realized that we could do in-camera edits. If you record a scene and then stop, and then you could change the angle or the next bit of it. If you screwed up the take, you could just rewind and record over. It was like the most rudimentary setup, but we became obsessed with it, and we're making like all these movies that were probably truly insane. Like, I think our parents just sort of politely smiled and like, that's nice, dear. But it became like truly a passion of realizing that we had a little bit of a knack for it. I guess it's a little bit like Edgar Wright's sort of homebrew filmmaking that he had before he got into selling TV shows and movies. He did pretty much the same thing with his friends, just doing like really fun kind of stuff. I did find an old thing that I had written when I was like 6 or 7 that was like, I guess you could only describe it as a spec script, but it was a spec script for Next Generation or something.
Oh, nice.
But it was so weird, and it was like it's supposed to be like a satire almost. And I think I think at one point Kirk's ship showed up and they called it the USS Old Fart or something. It was like I was like, damn, that's savage,
Is that the geezer class?
Yeah, exactly. I don't feel that way anymore, but that was apparently at the time. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna skewer old Star Trek. Step aside, Next Generation's where it's at.
So I take it Picard was your captain as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, I've come to appreciate Kirk, but quite a bit. But I think Picard very much was I think embodied both the strength, but also the thinking man's captain that I thought was really interesting, because he reminded me of my dad in a way of a lot of because my dad was someone who was not quick to anger. And instead, if he came against a solution, he would just very quietly be stubborn about it and just very politely find logical reasons why you needed to see it his way. And eventually would just wear down the person on the operator line on the other end until they finally gave him what he wanted. But in a weird abstract way that was sort of a reflection of how the Federation resolves conflict. Their answer was not, let's just blow them out of the water. It was always, let's find a diplomatic solution and end this war before it starts, or bring this bad actor to justice, rather than having it explode into all out war with the Klingons. And I think Picard, that was sort of his philosophy in many ways. And I would say you could say the same thing about Kirk, although I think Kirk was eager to get into ship battles, maybe a little more than Picard. But yeah, I don't remember what the original question was, but I love all the captains now. It's as an adult, it's hard for me to say like, oh, this X is the best captain. I think a lot of it really is just about nostalgia at this point.
Exactly. Yes. So I'm sure now that you are working in Star Trek, you understand what you are in for, and I'm sure you're going to be going to conventions for the rest of your life. But before now, had you been to any conventions, or have you cosplay, or did you read? Obviously, you read some books, because I heard you say that. But
yeah, I mean, I have been to plenty of conventions. I grew up Greenwood is about 15 to 20 minutes south of Indianapolis, which it's rightfully called Nap Town because there's not really a lot to do there, but the one thing they did have going for them is that they did have conventions come into town. And so pretty much any sort of nerdy convention, they had one that was called Gen Con. Well, they still do, called Gen Con, which is like the really big role-playing board game convention, but has kind of evolved into its own sort of mini Comic-Con in a way. And there was also Star Wars Celebration. It was another big one that came through. I never made it to a Star Wars convention specifically, but I went to a couple of Comic-Cons, and really enjoyed, kind of seeing all the cosplay. I've done a little bit of, like, I think for Halloween, I went as I think I kind of fudged a little bit. I had a beard, so I looked like Riker, but I had Captain Pips because I just
nice. Okay. Very good. And are you going any upcoming conventions and commitments?
If they invite me, I will go. Like, I know in the age of Omicron, it's a little tricky.
Yeah.
But I'm double vaxxed and boosted at this point, and it seems like a lot of the conventions are trying to take precautions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would absolutely love to go. I don't know who to talk to, or if anybody wants to hear me ramble on about Star Trek.
They do, and we're going to get on it.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, we would like to formally invite you to Chicago to join the rest of us. So even
we're
if
all
you're
going to be
not,
in Chicago.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, yeah, if I can get on a panel, let me know.
I mean, if you're not, you can just hang out with us and go for
That's also true.
Yeah, this is not an official kind of CBS, Viacom kind of invite kind of thing. We can't pay you, but if you happen to be there at the same time. How do you feel about wearing scants? Because I've got a bunch of scants. We could all rock out
my
scants.
I have worn a kilt before, so it doesn't really feel that dissimilar in my
No, cool. Let's make it happen. Awesome.
Yes.
I've thrown this out there to, I don't know, some Discovery people and just anyone that'll listen. Men in scants is the way to go. So if we want to work that into Prodigy,
Yes.
we need to normalize men in scants.
I'm all for throwing in as many sort of like bringing back scants and background details and
the fact that one of your main characters is a Medusan is like, that's a throwback, right? Like,
absolutely. And I always
the game
and the game. Yes. I imagine this version of the game was probably a little less addictive and nefarious. In my head canon, it was somebody at Starfleet was like, well, minus the nefarious aspects, a good idea is a good idea, and this Conan disc game is pretty fun. Maybe we could do a less
I would imagine a Ferengi jumped on that because that would be quite profitable.
For sure.
See, since Kevin mentioned Medusans, do you have any clues as to what Murph is? I saw a tweet from like way back at the beginning, like episode 1, that like Murph came from something deep within canon.
Yes, that was my tweet, actually.
Oh, was it your tweet? Okay, yeah. So, anything?
I mean, I don't want to give it away because I feel like people have been having really fun about it. Fun with it.
Yeah.
I will say it was mentioned in a Star Trek show, so we're not just making it up. It was said out loud.
Nice.
And I think of at this point, thousands of guesses that I've seen in the last few months, one person got it right.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Aaron, are you forcing us to watch like all 700 hours of Star Trek? Try and figure it out.
Well, you're not even going to tell us what series?
I'll do it.
No, don't spoil
Okay,
it.
don't say it. Okay.
Or on the
I
search
feel like
for
I've
Murph.
maybe built it up so much at this point that it's going to be a disappointment almost.
No, because us fans, it's that one tiniest thing. It's like, what in the heck? That's brilliant. No, it's even that small. Yeah.
Okay. I think you will be happy. I'll put it that way.
Yay. I'm excited. I don't have Twitter. I missed out on the whole. I didn't know there was a whole thing about it. So yay.
Yeah, I tweeted it and it kind of went viral on Trek Twitter.
Yeah, you drove us all insane.
So we did have a couple of questions from our listeners, and one, Greg Molumby asked a question, which I think we already sort of discussed. He wanted to know about the process of finding the right clips, and I think we sort of covered that. But Christian Alonso asked this question: who would be on your personal dream crew if you had to do the Kobayashi Maru test?
Gosh.
And you didn't have to find audio clips, so you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
it's not that dissimilar from what you saw in the episode. I think. Odo, wasn't technically in Starfleet, but he definitely had a Starfleet personnel file and flew on the Defiant, as the bridge crew member. And I would argue was one of the greatest security officers to ever serve on a Starfleet.
Well, I would give you this then. Wasn't the Bajoran militia rolled into Starfleet by the end of DS9? So that would make his commission part of Starfleet at that point?
Yeah, I don't recall Bajor ever officially joining.
I'm thinking of the books.
Yeah, but in the books they do eventually join. But I think that there's a couple of reasons why Odo. This is a diversion, but but there's a couple of reasons why Odo was okay for him to be in there, because he was a bridge crew member on a Starfleet crew, even though he wasn't in a Starfleet. Also, Dal's command, as we've learned from other holodeck programs, ambiguous commands can result in surprising results. He says, just give me some of the best you got in the holodeck database. And so I would argue, I love Worf. I tried to write Worf into it as like our tactical officer. But I would say Odo was probably a better security officer than Worf, because there's so many occasions where Worf kind of tried to stop the invasion of the Enterprise. It didn't quite work out. Whereas Odo was literally like going undercover and doing like detective work and bringing down spy rings. He's probably the best one, in my opinion. It's hard to top Spock. I do love Riker. The Doctor is one of my favorite characters in Star Trek, period. And gosh, it would have been great to have him say, please state the nature of your medical emergency.
Yes.
Uhura, I absolutely adore. Scotty, same. I think at one point we had toyed with, if Scotty wasn't going to work, I think Geordi was going to be my next pick, because Geordi, I feel what I like about Geordi is like he's already an extremely talented engineer, but he never stops learning. I think you see throughout all the Star Trek, like he's always curious and always kind of learning new stuff and borrowing from other things and then innovating. And I think that's really important. That adaptability is arguably the most important engineering trait, that I think only Scotty surpassed him in that regard.
Let's not forget Trip Tucker.
Yeah, Trip Tucker as well. I think Trip was also going to be one of the 9 Enterprise, but again, due to production reasons, we had to pare it down to 4 or 5. So, but we'll find a way to make an homage to Trip. There was a line that was cut, if you recall, at the top of the scene. I think Jankum says, like, what about this JT Kirk guy? But the original line was a little longer, which is like, ooh, what about Archer? Maybe he comes with a bow, or this JT Kirk guy.
Funny.
But yeah, I mean, I think, it was really difficult, I think, to try to put together the definitive, like, best bridge crew. This is an argument that I think every Star Trek fan has had since the show started creating sort of other versions of the bridge crew. And we debated long into the night in the writer's room. We literally wound up we had like lists. It was just like of just like, communications, ops, tactical / engineering. And then by the time we had listed out, everybody had made like a great point of why this was. We had literally listed every single Star Trek character. So it was not a helpful exercise at all. All great.
Oh, funny.
But it was fun.
First officer, Macduff.
Yeah, it was fun. You're right.
Oh. Is that something you ever did as a kid with your homemade movies? Yeah.
I mean, I don't specifically recall beyond that spec script or whatever, the play, just putting it into my homemade movies, but definitely talked about it on the playgrounds and then eventually at the conventions and in the classrooms. And as and that's partially why we thought the premise of this might actually work, is because who among us hasn't speculated at some point or another.
Exactly. And how amazing is that, to go from writing a spec script as a kid to you're writing real scripts now, and from playing the game that we all play with who would be the best crew to actually doing it for real. That's just like, you talk about dream come true. That's just amazing.
Yeah. And I feel like I feel the burden as much as anybody to try to get it right and save the next generation of fans. And but thankfully it seems like, we seem to be doing something right, because everyone, the response has been overwhelmingly positive, especially now that people are seeing the direction we're taking the show, and why we were very specific about the plotting of how much we introduce what and when and where. So that's been very rewarding, I think, just to see that, kids are enjoying our show, and they want to know more about Janeway. They want to know about who that Spock guy was. They want to see where that Enterprise D bridge came from. It's fantastic.
Have you heard any of the feedback that's out there from kids?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of podcasts that actually record them. There's a lot of people that have been recording their kids responding to the videos or to the episodes and sending them to me on Twitter and stuff. And I can't help but tear up a little bit when I see that.
Yes.
Like
I've heard some of that too.
Yeah. There's one video where it was a couple of kids that they were like, I would say they were probably age 4 and 6. And clearly this was their first exposure to Star Trek. And they were on the bed going, "We got phasers, baby." I was like, yes, you do have phasers.
That's awesome.
And you don't point them at each other.
I don't have kids, but my brother and sister means I have nieces and nephews now. So a Tuesday night we Zoom, and they live in England. So yeah, we Zoom and we watch it. And it's my way to indoctrinate them and brainwash them into loving Star Trek.
Good. That's the
awesome
plan. That's our nefarious plan.
Absolutely. Yes.
So subject everybody that we interview to this thing, which is a quiz about Scotland.
A quiz about Scotland. Oh dear.
Yeah, no.
You can become an honorary
Scott. You win. There's prizes. They're not very good. It's just anyway, so I'm going to give you a couple of questions, maybe as few as 2, maybe as many as 40 questions about Scotland.
I can already tell this is going to go terribly.
It usually does.
That's fine. Do you know the scoring system is completely arbitrary and made up?
Okay, just grade me on a curve. That's all I ask.
There's no logic or sense to it. So, question 1: what is the national animal of Scotland?
The national animal of Scotland.
Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, my instinct is to say it's like a lion or something, but that's probably not correct.
That is not correct, Aaron. It is the unicorn.
Oh wow, that's cool.
I know.
It comes from the flocks of wild unicorns.
Yes,
that roam the Highlands.
Well, I was thinking in terms of like what would be on the crest, when I feel like a lot of those crests obviously came out in the Middle Ages, where the strange animals they brought from distant Africa were considered symbols of power. But I guess a unicorn is equally powerful.
I thought it was the Loch Ness.
The Loch Ness monster.
Unicorn?
Nessie. Yeah.
Yeah, Nessie. Or
Like
Hamish.
Who?
Hamish, isn't that an animal?
Haggis.
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 Not an animal.
I mean,
Haggis.
it could be an animal.
Haggis is the wee 3-legged animal that runs about the hills, and they're easy to catch because they can only run in circles.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a true thing. You heard it here first. Okay. Okay. What colours are on the Scottish flag?
Oh Lord. I want to say white and green. That's probably way wrong.
You got half right. White and blue.
Okay, white and blue.
Yeah, you can have 10 points for that.
Okay.
Modeled after the Hellenic flag. Blue and white.
No, it's not.
We're going with it.
That's just a lie. You just
truth.
Rhea tries to interject Greece into
Greece
everything.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, the Greeks invented it, Joe. We
the
know
world.
this.
Yeah.
This is true. Do not argue with these things.
How many people live in Scotland? So what's the current population roughly to the nearest million? I'll give you it.
The current population of Scotland. Not the UK, right?
Not the UK. The country of Scotland.
Gosh, like because the UK, even by American standards, they have them. I'm going to say 5 million.
Okay, I'm going to give you that. Yeah, it's around about 5.5 million. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Well done. It's hardly any of us.
How many points for that, Joe?
How many points? Oh, 37.
Okay.
37
Oh, we're at
points.
47
That
now.
means he's got 47.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Can we pause?
There it is.
And Aaron, I think you did miss a very important
I know
number.
where you're going with that.
Okay. 42 attempts. Okay. I know that's like the answer of the universe, but come on.
Yeah,
I liked it because it teased us.
If I had one regret, it was not putting more Star Trek references into that episode. But yes, every time I hear that 42, I'm like, should have been 47. Should have been 47.
Okay. As long as we're on the same page, I'll let it slide this one.
I liked the tease, just for the record.
Okay.
42.
I mean, I
Ooh.
also love Douglas Adams, so I actually don't mind it, but it's just like it could have been 47.
Okay, can you pay attention now to the you're in the middle of a,
Yes.
a quiz for your life? Aaron, is Scotland bigger or smaller than Belgium?
Is Scotland bigger or smaller than Belgium?
Yeah.
I'm going to say bigger.
That's correct. If you'd
Hey,
said smaller,
Hey.
I was going to be really offended.
I've been to Belgium. It is a very small country.
Have you been to Scotland though?
No, I actually have not been to the UK. I'm going this year.
Computer,
Wonderful.
end interview.
No, this year I'm going specifically to Scotland. I'm going for a wedding. It's gonna be in a castle
Nice.
and everything.
Nice.
Cool.
So you'll have to give me some tips of where to go.
Absolutely.
How many
Yeah.
points was that, Joe?
79.
Okay, so 47 and 79 is.
And last question then, which sport was invented in Scotland?
I mean, golf, right?
Oh yeah. Another 1,000,003 points.
Wow, that gives you 1,129 points.
Wow, I'll take that score any day of the week.
You win.
I win.
Yeah. Kevin, could you do the fanfare music, please?
There's fanfare music?
Yeah, like,
There you go. You did
Yeah,
it.
cool.
Just
I
assume
had
it was
to-
Amazing Grace played on the bagpipes or something.
I had to do it myself. Aaron Waltke, I give
Dubbed
you
me.
honorary citizenship of
Oh
the
my
great
God.
country of Scotland.
Wow.
Give
I
me my
may need
great
it.
power as citizen of Scotland.
I may need that, so I appreciate
I
it.
do the thing with the sword that the Queen does on your shoulders. There
Thank
you
you.
go. Done. Well done. That was fun.
Much
Thank you.
appreciated.
So much for taking the time to talk to us. I absolutely loved everything you said. And you enjoy Star Trek. It definitely shows,
It's
obviously,
so
in
cool.
Prodigy and in here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's
Well,
been fun.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
thanks for the kind words. Thanks for watching. You know, I assure you that Kobayashi will not be the last TNG references that we make in Star Trek Prodigy. So, keep watching, keep a lookout. They're coming. We have a full 40 episodes that we're writing. And boy, oh boy, I can't wait for you to see what we're writing right now. It's
exciting.
gonna blow your minds.
Super
Okay.
excited. Is that just
But-
season 1, 40 episodes?
40 episodes. So the way we structure it storytelling wise into 10 episode sort of arcs.
Okay.
But they seem to be referring to it as 2 seasons of 20, which is not that dissimilar from old school Star Trek, I'm totally cool with that.
Did you know this first block was going to be split the way it did around this first half of the Discovery season?
I mean, in terms of the hiatus for a few weeks, that was, I think the Hagemans have said otherwise, elsewhere, that it was due to the pandemic. We just needed, our vendors are overseas, and we just needed a couple more weeks to get these episodes that are going to live on forever as good as they can be before we finish them.
Yeah.
But as far as splitting at the 10 episode arc moments, yes, we always sort of were planning for there to be a little mid-season break, and you'll see the way that the season and the episodes are structured, that it's built for that. Can't wait for you to see how the rest of this little arc plays out.
Excited.
Oh, super duper excited.
Well, thanks for having me, everyone. This has been
Oh my gosh.
really
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank
Enjoy
you for,
your day off.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for your contributions to the Star Trek world. We love them.
Well, that means a lot. I'm certainly doing my best, as is everyone on our crew. Our show is made with love, so I'm glad that's coming across.
It definitely
and
shows.
we don't have to put this in. Are you enjoying are you watching the new Discovery Picard?
Lower Decks.
Yeah, and I've read all the scripts through season 3 of Picard. I know what's happening.
Oh wow.
So,
yeah,
no people.
You can't just end it there.
I know.
I know what's happening.
He can.
Aaron just walked out of the chat. How weird is that?
I wish I could share with you what's happening in Picard season 3, but
you could. We won't tell him.
Please don't.
Promise.
Shut up, Joe.
I don't think you. First of all, I don't think you would like the spoilers because there's some cool stuff happening. I'll say.
Good.
But no, I think all the shows, are kind of hitting a really great stride, and it's what an exciting time it is to be in a new era of Star Trek. I wish I could go back in time to past Aaron when Enterprise was canceled, at season 4, and everyone was saying this is the death of Star Trek forever. And I'm like, just wait, man, you're going to be part of this third wave.
My gosh. Yeah.
It's going to be great.
They filmed Discovery and Strange New Worlds not far from where I live. I keep thinking cool. I need to go and crash a set somewhere.
Yeah. My one of my friends, Bill Wilkoff, is a writer producer on Strange New Worlds. And
cool.
Those episodes are pretty cool too. I've read those scripts too. And
of course you have.
We all talk and communicate because we want to make, again, we're building a shared universe. So
right.
We don't want to step on each other's toes, but we also want our shows to inform one another. So it's just been kind of interesting with Prodigy in particular, because we take place, in this sort of interesting window that no one has really explored much. If you look at Memory Alpha, 2383 and 84 are blank. And it's before the events of the flashbacks of Picard, with Utopia Planitia, where they're, it's sort of a disaster, and the A500s that were sort of keeping the fringes of the Federation, working, where all had to be shut down and they had to pull back their borders and become more sort of survivalist. We're not there yet. So we're kind of in this space that's like post Voyager, post Dominion War, post Borg Queen, post Nemesis, where there's just sort of like this unabashed return to form, like early seasons TNG, season 1, 2, 3, where it's like, wear any uniform you want, try any technology. Oh, the Traveler's going to come on board and send us to the corner of the universe. Let's go for it.
Cool.
And
awesome.
so like it is this sort of bold new era of exploration and experimentation and pushing the literal boundaries of what we know, and perhaps before the fall, but that even then I feel like we are going to find ways to explore, I'll put it that way. So it's we take some very bold swings in Prodigy, but I assure you we have thought through all of it. There are explanations for everything, and it will connect in with what you see, because if you think about it, in Picard, there's only like 2 or 3 flashbacks totaling maybe like 2 minutes total of screen time of what 2385 actually looks like. And it's a really big galaxy out there. And so like, we're going to try to fill in the blanks a little bit as far as what's going on elsewhere.
Awesome. And Prodigy's in great hands, so we're not worried.
Yes. Well, thanks again for having me. This was really fun.
Thanks so much.
Now
Aaron.
go away before we ask you more questions.
Exactly. We'll see you at a con somewhere.
Yeah. Yes.
Incoming transmission.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and hope you'll join the Facebook group Federation Council Chambers. You're welcome to start conversations with us or add any general Star Trek info you want to share with the group.
If you'd like to send us an email, you can email us directly at galaxyclass@ufp.earth, and we just might read your email on the show. You can also follow us on Twitter at Galaxy Class Pod.
So please hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a star rating and a written review. This helps others find the show. And you can also follow the entire network's podcasts with our master feed by searching United Federation of Podcasts. This way you won't miss any of our fine shows like All Good Things, Franchise Fatigue, Always Hold On to Arrow, History with the Szilagys, Mickey's Marvels, Sasquatch, and Infinite Diversity. So, Amy, where can people find you when you stumble into a holodeck and into a life or death situation?
Well, right next to me would be Counselor Troy, so I will survive and come out stronger and better than ever. When I'm done becoming stronger and better than ever, you can find me here on the network where I'm hosting All Good Things with my good friend Mark. We are having a great time talking all of Star Trek. Awesome. I am also co-hosting Union Federation, which is about the new Star Trek and the Orville that's coming in a couple months. Mm-hmm. I am on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, and of course in the Federation Council chambers. And Joe, where can people find you when you are honoring me as an honorary Scot? Because you haven't done that yet.
You haven't done the quiz yet, though.
Yeah.
You have to do the quiz, and I feel that you wouldn't score very highly.
Rhea and I had to do the quiz to become co-hosts. So
that's right.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
And that's why you guys are honorary Scots.
Mm-hmm.
But
Woohoo!
Amy,
bring on the haggis.
You have to study for this exam.
Yay.
When I'm not doing that, you can find me on the Federation Council Chambers. You can tweet me on the Twitter at JoeyJoe77UK, or you can email me, joepodcasts@gmail.com. Rhea, where can people find you when you're not watching Kobayashi and crying into your peanut butter and eggs?
Oh my gosh, Joe, it's like you have a camera in my house spying on me at all times.
Yeah.
Well, when I'm not doing that, I'm studying how to be a pilot and whatnot. And when I'm not doing that, I'm sleeping. But when I'm not doing that, you can find me on the Federation Council chambers as long as I'm not in Facebook jail. You can also send me an email at riapod47@gmail.com. And later this afternoon, you'll see me outside shoveling snow.
I'll be able to watch that on the cameras that I've got in your house. Nice.
That's very true. You'll have to aim them out to the driveway, but it's all good.
It's funny. My sister just bought me a camera that's sitting pointing at my driveway. I get it. I get a text message anytime somebody comes to my door when I'm not home.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, where can people find you when you're not watching video footage of yourself in your own driveway, shoveling snow or picking up packages?
Well, I am staying inside my house where it is warm because it's freaking cold outside right now. But if I am out and about, you'll probably catch me on Stage Whispers, the local theater podcast. We just dropped a new episode. I'm not on this one, but I'm in the next one. We're doing a news episode next week, so that'll come soon. Or True North Nerds, our big nerd stravaganza podcast I do with a few local friends.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
If you'd like to help us keep all our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/UFPearth to get all the details. A huge shout out to Davey Willett for being our very own show supporter. Thank you so much.
We would like to recognize our executive producers, Brandon Shea Mutella, Ken Tripp, Zach Moore, and Tony Robinson. We'd also like to thank Zach Tripp for our opening and closing music, and Tony Robinson for our amazing artwork.
Thank you for beaming aboard the Galaxy class. And until next time.
The Kobayashi Maru is a no-win scenario designed to test how one reacts to a hopeless situation.
I believe the stubbornness of my co-host should be written up in medical textbooks.
Great joy and gratitude.
Live long and prosper. Stay classy, Galaxy!
Engage.
This has been a production of MTMR Media Works.
We also have a comment from our listener, Mike. That's not true.
Who's Mike?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Stop, Joe. You're freaking me out.